Great. So we're back, and I'm here with Alastair Cole, who's the director of Iorram. That's in Gaelic for boat song. Alastair, thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me, Amanda.
Great. And we're actually chatting at, earlier than when this comes out, but during the world premiere of the right before the world premiere of the film of the at the Glasgow Film Festival. So tell me a little bit about how this project even came about. Firstly, it's a stunning film. I recommend anyone and everyone to see it. But how did you come up with this project?
Great, thanks. Thanks for the kind words about the film. Yeah, I mean, it's a feature documentary. It's very much a creative documentary, but it's fundamentally about Gaelic and the fishing community of the Outer Hebrides. And for audiences that haven't seen it or seen a trailer, it's entirely composed of sound archive that was recorded in the 1940s and 50s and 60s in the Outer Hebrides, and then visually entirely composed of contemporary sort of an observational portrait that I filmed over 2 or 3 years in the islands. And it stems from an observation and some research that has been being done at the University of Edinburgh by a colleague called Magnus Kors, who's also the film's co-producer. That's really about this connection between the Gaelic language and the fishing communities, and this kind of really inherent tie that exists, that anything that were to happen to the fishing industry and community is very much interlinked with the Gaelic language. And that's not only through the sort of speakers, the fishermen themselves, which 75% of the inshore fishermen, I think, speak Gaelic on the boats, and that's a much higher percentage than sort of you'll find in the everyday community. But also it's tied, inherently to the place and to the landscape and to the sea, and this knowledge that's tied into it. So really the project started from that idea and thinking about ways to bring the past into the present and to understand that relationship between the past and the present. And just going to the Outer Hebrides, going somewhere like that, you're very much aware of it when you're in there through the sea and through the boats. They've all got these objects and places, and people have stories to tell, and the stories are there. And fortunately, through the sound archive, they're also recorded in a way. This was audio recordings that were recorded when portable sound recording first was invented, and it's an extraordinary archive that's housed at the School of Scottish Studies that underpins the film. But we had access to 30,000 clips to work with, we did not put 30,000 clips in the film. Thankfully, I wouldn't have managed that. But it was an interesting creative project that was sort of an experiment in a way to see what would happen if you literally, we said that one. I wonder what would happen if you had a film that was just sound archive and just contemporary visuals, and also as a mechanism to explore these themes.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's what was so powerful to me, is that it normally flips your idea of an archive film. But it's so important to that. From my understanding of the tradition of the Gaelic community, the oral tradition, and that archive is so important to that community. And so it so rings true to that area. But how did you go about the filming? I mean, one of the things I really particularly like too is like, you look at some of your shots are just absolutely stunning, like, underwater, outdoors, just the typical thing that you think about with the Outer Hebrides in Scotland. But there are moments where you're looking at the contemporary with the mix of the older soundscapes that, are just like everyday, or, kind of, I was thinking about this Sports Direct mug that like one of the sailors or whatnot was holding, and it doesn't sort of match up with like your dreamy version of, like Scotland. So how did
Yeah.
you go about choosing what to film and where to film and how to film?
Well, it's an interesting point, because in some ways, the film was a little bit, a touch of it was made back to front. It wasn't ideally made, but because I filmed a lot. I was filming while I was listening to a lot of archive and researching a lot of archive. So, and it took a huge amount of time to get to a stage where we had a kind of wide, long list of sound archive that we could sit down with the editor and start to actually navigate. And it was piles of paper of notes and things that we'd been listening to, and at the same time I was filming all the time, thinking what I really wanted to capture was this a kind of portrait of the people and the contemporary, fishing community and seafaring community today, which is really everyone in the islands, because they're islands. It's the sea, and the fishing world is very much part and parcel of the community. So it was important to get on the boats, obviously, and had some great access through the Western Isles Fishing Association. I spent a lot of time on the inshore boats, which are the kind of boats that bring up creels and they're fishing for lobsters and crabs. But then also on the kind of trawlers which sit just outside there and catch a lot of prawns and things. And it was about showing, like any documentary film, you want to provide a window into a world that audiences otherwise wouldn't see. So that was one objective, but also to capture the everyday and the reality of what is a really tough, dangerous job, actually, on the sea especially. But it's something that is, they're very passionate about, these guys, and it's tough, and yes, it's, they often end up in pretty gnarly situations. But they love the sea, and there is a real beauty. And obviously, you're sitting in the Minch, and it's 2 a.m. and they're trawling in the middle of summer, and the sun's coming up, and the gannets are dropping. They get to enjoy these moments, and they're really fortunate. But at the same time, a storm will come through, and things can get hairy. So they are really skilled, but you need to capture both sides of that, I think. And it also goes for the onshore work. I mean, one of the things we made a big effort to do was also understand this relationship between the land and the sea. And the processing of the seafood itself is a great example of that, because it's actually steeped in history. So as much as people think about the seafaring stories, and a lot of the archive were about tragedies and the fishermen talking about how they used to do things, actually what we really wanted and was important was the female voice within that, because it absolutely is part and parcel of that world. And it was in the archive, but as with every archive, they're absolutely fraught with politics and dynamics of the time. When they were caught, you could hear the nature of the recordists of just what was 1950s men going up to the islands, and how they would even engage with some of the recordists was pretty difficult to hear sometimes. But it is a sign of the time, but it's also an observation of the progress when you listen to these. But today, that processing, that is done on shore, and there's some amazing factories there that take basically the catch from the fishing boats, and they're processing it straight away. A lot of the ladies working in there are still the partners of the fishermen, and that goes across from Bada to Grimsby. We filmed and up in Stornoway, and we matched a lot of them with sort of the female stories of the herring girls, for instance, who were working on the shore, and they were a travelling group. The girls would leave from Harris and go to the mainland, or go down to Bada and go with the fleet, which are amazing stories of just how many boats and how many people were working on that in the 1920s. But in reality, prawns are the modern herrings, if you want to think of it that way, because that's what's getting fished up there at the moment, and that sense of collectiveness that comes between both the aspects on shore and the sea was really important to give that portraiture of the islands as a whole. So yes, you get beautiful suns. I mean, I to be fair, there was a point where it was too beautiful. I got sent back by the editor and the producer to go and find some storms, really, because the trouble was, when you're filming on boats, no one will take you out if it's stormy, so you end up just in these beautiful conditions all the time. But I went up. I did a few shoots in January that sorted that out pretty quick.
Yeah, and so you produced, and I mean, you edit. Did you do the editing as well? But you filmed most of it then.
So yeah, I filmed most of it. No, but I work with a wonderful editor called Colin Money, and Colin Money is we're really lucky to have on board with this film. He's got a strong connection with a. He's not a Gaelic speaker, but his family is and his children are, and he's got a really strong connection to the islands, and he's worked on some great Scottish fiction films, sort of Magdalene Sisters and these types of films. So he brought with him a really wonderful cinematic sensibility and an understanding of audiences as well, that a really great editor does. And we were I was lucky to have him on board. We got great support from Screen Scotland and BBC Alba they took a chance on the project. Everyone did, and Adam Daughtry, the producer, as well. Because it was it started as a concept, really, and I literally had a proof of concept to show them at the start, to say this is how it might work. And then we started from this position of all this archive and all these notes that I had, and the kind of rough assembly of the sound archive and all the film material. Then Colin and I sort of waded through all that together, and yeah, we were lucky with timing and all sorts of things. We did a lot of work. We got the large majority of the edit sort of done just before lockdown. But even stranger, we had planned to finish the edit remotely, We were probably the only film production that had happened to do this in January last year, and we're literally ready when lockdown happened. We were accidentally ready to edit remotely, so we were able to finish it at the time. But yeah, I think with any film, the editor's role, especially in documentary film, the editor's role sort of can't be overstated, and there's a reason they get one of the first credits, because they are they're the eyes and the storytellers that can really make these things work. And with this film, it was no exception. And we sat ploughing through this material and making decisions, but it was Colin and I together really at that stage.
You mentioned that, well, I'm actually, like, when I first read and was interested in looking at the film, it says it's the first feature documentary ever to be done in Gaelic. And but you yourself mentioned you don't necessarily speak Gaelic, but it's very much it's for an audience, you say, that isn't a Gaelic speaking per se. I think that's really fascinating. Can you elaborate a little?
Yeah, I mean, it was a bit of an anomaly that we sort of discovered it quite a wee way into the edit, that we were making a documentary film for cinema. And obviously some like BBC Alba are a supporter of the project. They make great Gaelic television and really great TV docs, and they exist. But creative documentary and cinema documentary is its own sort of entity, and Scotland in the last 10-15 years has had a really burgeoning scene with this. And I think there was a combination of that, and this is my second feature doc as well, and I suppose for Screen Scotland and Scotland to support that has created this place where this could happen. But at the same time, it was we just sort of suddenly realised that the film was entirely in Scottish Gaelic, and had that been done before. And I think if you went and shot an observational doc in the islands now, you would most likely get a bit of a mix. So there was it was a bit of a happy accident with the archive, but it makes an interesting point that the language itself, it hasn't happened before. There's been a wonderful feature fiction film done in 2008 called The Inaccessible Pinnacle that Chris Young produced, and so that was the first full fiction in entirely in Scottish Gaelic. But at the same time, I think there's it's an interesting commentary to think about maybe why it hasn't happened before, in a sense, and to have us reflect a little bit about British language and the British multilingualism and its representation in cinema, because you are making it for an audience. And I think maybe there's a inclination from filmmakers, distributors, funders, whoever there has been in the past, to think that we need to do these things in English. But actually, what this film reveals, and what the interest in the Scottish Gaelic language now reveals, Duolingo in Scots Gaelic has 600,000 people using it right now, 200,000 in Scotland. There's a real interest, and people can handle subtitles. It's fine. If Parasite can become one of the most watched films, people can handle watching a Scottish Gaelic film, and there's a lot to offer through that. And the language itself brings with it incredible cinematic sensibility, because it is an oral language. It's a storytelling language, so it offers a great amount to a filmmaker like me, to explore something really fascinating, but also to bring something maybe to an audience, like you said, that isn't. Yes, we want this to be able to be loved and appreciated in the islands and by the Gaeltacht and by the Gaelic speakers, but there's also a lot to say that cinema can say outside of that as well to a non-Gaelic audience. And we are releasing this film after the Glasgow Film Festival. It gets released theatrically, but we're actually releasing it in 10 versions, because we're releasing it in French, German, Italian, and Spanish as well, because we have them, because it's a virtual release, we can put it out. But also with Gaelic audio description, English audio description, Gaelic subtitles, without subtitles, because there's a benefit to the virtual release that we can do this, but also it's like any foreign language film. I think it can be understood in those terms. The title is Iorram, and the English title, the translation is Boat Song. The Italian title is Canto di Voga. So there isn't. Yeah, we don't want to prioritize English, and yes, it's a big part of. Obviously, it's our language, but we can have this film viewed by English audiences in the same way that French audiences and Spanish audiences will hopefully get to see it as well, and take something from it, and also, find the universal. Because at the end of the day, it's a film about storytelling and ceilidhs and oral history, which are very universal elements.
Yeah, absolutely. You can't not talk about the soundtrack. It's absolutely incredible. It's
Yeah.
Aidan Rourke, is that?
Aidan O'Rourke, yeah, Aidan O'Rourke. Absolutely worth looking up. I mean, he has become, a good pal through this project. He's a wonderful musician. We were again really lucky to have him agree to come on board. That he sort of, believed in the project very early on. He's from Oban originally, but he plays with a band called Lal, and who are an extraordinary. But in some ways, I was almost surprised that this is his first film score. But when you hear his music, it's very cinematic, and in the way he approaches it. And he was a perfect musician because what he does musically is in some ways what we're trying to do with the film, and combining the past and the present. And he's a fiddle player by trade, but very much a multi-instrumentalist composer, and brings a lot of electronic effects and sounds and loops and all these things, and he brought that to the score to create something that was really special, we think. And it was interesting the way we had to do it, because it wasn't really normal as far as finishing the film, given the film score. The film, Aidan was always on board from the rough cut stage, so he engaged at that point. So we were able to send him an early cut, and for him to respond to, start sending ideas through, and start developing them. And we were, it was a very wonderful and collaborative project. Because of that, modelled on a few other films, modelled on a film called From Scotland with Love that Colin also edited, and that was done with King Creosote. And there is this, we wanted the music to be part of the film, and to have a real musicality and a lyricism, and we knew that Aidan could bring that, but it's also a very hard process. It's a really tough gig as a musician in some ways, and it's testament to Aidan, to what it's come out like, because you're not writing songs, you've got a lot to compose and a lot of ideas, and to develop them. And with this particular film, it was also him responding to the archive and engaging with the archive. So you have these amazing, some of my favourite moments in the score are where he's actually accompanying the singers, which these are people that were recorded in their kitchens in South Uist in 1940 something, and here's Aidan and a group of 9 musicians accompanying them as they normally sing out of tune and drop keys. So he's got to drop keys with them, which is tough going, but they did it. And then again, you have these, it brings together the what we're seeing, what we're hearing in both accounts, and to create something that we think is quite unique and special for those moments especially. And I should say, sorry, that the score is coming out. It is coming out as a full score. So Aidan will be releasing that. It's, I think, a bit later in the year, when hopefully we'll be able to see the film in real cinemas as well. But you can pre-order it with Reveal Records, but look up Aidan anyway. He's great.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I mean, it's nice that you mentioned From Scotland with Love, as we're sharing that as part of our Cinescapes project this month in March. And yeah, I definitely saw those ties, but then again, just really thought about how, and I didn't realize the editor had edited both.
Yeah, and it was a great. I mean, and Virginia, who directed it, and Grant, who produced it, like they were kind enough to share some, to help me as well early on in the project, to share some thoughts about approaches to even the production of a film like this, which is tricky, and they did a wonderful job, and I think it provided especially within that editing music relationship that Colin sort of led and figured out with what he did with King Creosote there, helped us a lot to figure out the best approach for this as well.
Yeah. Or it premiered at the Glasgow Film Festival, and what's kind of the rest of your trajectory? How do you see the film?
So at the moment, we're launching the film at an interesting time. So it got a bit delayed with COVID, to be honest, but at the same time, it's given us a moment in time where the film actually speaks to a really contemporary issue, which is Scottish fishing and the Gaelic language, and the fact that Scottish fishing is on the front pages and a current issue means that we hope the film can really engage in that audience, in that wider discussion as well. It's obviously not an issue-based film, but it hopefully speaks to that. And so we are immediately after the Glasgow Film Festival on March the 5th, which is the Friday, March the 5th. The film will be available in, I think, over 30 cinemas in the UK, and through the kind of cinema at home system. So in Scotland, sort of Filmhouse, GFT, DCA, these places you'll be able to watch it on their websites, available on their websites, and that's the cinema at home system, and it's a really interesting way to, I think, again, you'll get access to Q&As and to a lot of different versions of the film. So the film's available, I think it'll be up to 10 versions of that, which includes audio described, for Gaelic subtitles, English subtitles, French, Spanish, all sorts of things, which is a nice way to to highlight the kind of this language dynamic um, and yeah, so you'll be able to find that. So if you want to look it up, you can look up iorramfilm.com and you'll see where that's available, or check out your local independent cinema and hopefully they'll be screening it.
Great. Well, yeah, thanks again. I mean, was this, I don't know the rest of your work, but is this something that like has kind of been similar to what you've done, or is this transforming you thinking about something or your next
Well,
thing?
it's cinema. Yeah, I mean, I've been making films about language for quite a wee while, and that stems. So I bridge academia and filmmaking as well. I'm a lecturer at Newcastle University in film practice, but at the same time, my real interest research-wise has always been around language and society, and I think documentary film provides a really interesting. Creative documentary film provides a really interesting mechanism to explore that sort of issue because it's fundamentally quite cinematic. So my previous feature was about was in Africa, actually about mother tongue education in Africa, but and other films have been about multilingual couples and Finnish humour and these things. But the sound archive has triggered something. There has been something very sort of interesting for me as a filmmaker about working with sound archive and the result of this. And so there's a couple of projects we're developing at the moment that sort of may build on what we've learned here around what is possible with sound archive, because there is these incredible sound archives all around the world, and so one of them might be actually back in New Zealand, where I was originally born, hence the accent. But there's a lot of stories and worlds caught up in these sound archives, and I think there may just be some interesting films to be made that can embrace them and create some interesting cinema.
Great. Well, I definitely look forward to seeing what else you're going to work on, and I really loved this film, and we'll share it as much as we can because yeah, congratulations. It was really great. So it was really lovely talking to you as well. So thanks so
Great.
much for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me, Amanda.